Imagine this. You're standing in the kitchen, holding a glass of water. You open the cabinet to take your usual daily pills, maybe for sleep, maybe for your heartburn, maybe just to calm your nerves. You've done this 100 times. But this time you hesitate. Something feels off. You've been forgetting more lately, walking into rooms and not knowing why, struggling to find words, losing your train of thought mid-sentence. You chalk it up to aging. Normal, right? But what if it's not? What if the very pills you trust, medications you were told would help you, are quietly shrinking your brain, disrupting your memories, and increasing your risk of dementia? If you're over 60, this may not just be possible, it might already be happening. Over 55 million people worldwide are living with dementia today, and every 3 seconds, another person is diagnosed. Yet, behind these staggering numbers is a silent truth. In many cases, it's not simply age or genetics to blame. New research is uncovering a hidden danger. Common medications are playing a devastating role. In this video, we'll expose 9 widely prescribed medications linked to accelerated memory loss, and one in particular that may be the most dangerous of all. But don't worry, we won't just leave you with fear. At the end, you'll discover 3 scientifically proven foods that can protect your brain and help reverse early cognitive decline, naturally. Let's begin with the medications you need to know about, starting with number 9. 9. First-generation antihistamines. More harm than relief. John was 67, a retired mechanic from a small town where everyone knew his name. He spent decades fixing engines and helping neighbors, always with a quiet pride in his work. After retiring, his days slowed down. But one thing didn't: his allergies. Every spring, the sneezing and watery eyes returned like clockwork. To manage the discomfort, John reached for what had always worked: those little pink pills from the drugstore. Diphenhydramine. Benadryl, it said on the box. He took one every night without a second thought. Not just for allergies, but it helped him fall asleep, too. It became part of his routine. But then, small things started to change. He began missing appointments. Once, he forgot where he had parked his car. Another day, he got lost driving to his daughter's house, a place he'd been visiting for over 20 years. His family noticed. So did he. At first, they thought it was just age. But a deeper look uncovered something more troubling. Diphenhydramine, like many older antihistamines, belongs to a group of drugs called anticholinergics. These medications work by blocking acetylcholine, a vital chemical in the brain that supports memory and learning. A major medical study found that daily use of these drugs for just 3 years could increase the risk of dementia by 54%. That's not a small number. And the worst part? These drugs are found in almost every household. Many older adults like John take them regularly, completely unaware of the hidden danger. John stopped the pills. It wasn't easy, but with the help of his doctor, he switched to safer alternatives for his allergies and worked on natural sleep routines. His memory didn't bounce back overnight, but it didn't get worse. And that mattered. If you're like John, taking something small every day to help you sleep or ease allergy symptoms, maybe it's time to take a closer look. The medicine that brings you short-term comfort might be quietly working against your long-term brain health. 8. Benzodiazepines, the quiet suppressors. After her husband passed, Mary felt a deep emptiness. At 72, the silence in her house was deafening. Nights became the hardest. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, missing the warmth beside her. Her doctor prescribed something to help her sleep, a benzodiazepine. Just to take the edge off, he said, and it did. At first, it was a relief. She began sleeping through the night. The anxiety dulled. She could breathe again. But slowly, the nights blurred into days. She started feeling drowsy during conversations, sometimes forgetting what she had just said. Her daughter noticed Mary repeating stories. Once, she forgot how to turn on the oven, a simple thing she'd done thousands of times. The family feared the worst. Dementia? Depression? The truth was more complex and more preventable. Benzodiazepines, drugs like Valium, Ativan, or Xanax, work by enhancing GABA, a chemical in the brain that slows down neural activity. That's why they're effective for anxiety and sleep. But over time, they could do more harm than good. Studies now show a 51% increase in Alzheimer's risk with long-term use. In Mary's case, the medications weren't calming her. They were suppressing her brain, blunting her memory, fogging her focus, numbing not just her pain but her mind. Eventually, with careful medical guidance, Mary began tapering off the drug. It was difficult, more emotional than physical. But as the weeks went by, she felt a little more present, a little more herself. To those reading, if you or someone you love is taking medications for anxiety or sleep, especially after a life change or grief, it's worth revisiting the conversation with your doctor. There are safer ways to manage emotional pain, ways that don't dim your mind in the process. 7. Proton pump inhibitors, PPIs, the gut-brain saboteurs. Gerald was 75, a retired high school teacher. He had always been sharp-minded. He remembered his students' names even decades after they graduated. But over the years, something changed. It started subtly. He began forgetting appointments. Then came the names, his neighbor, his nephew, even the name of a close family friend. Everyone assumed it was just aging. Gerald thought so too. After all, wasn't forgetfulness just part of growing old? But what no one noticed was that Gerald had been taking omeprazole, a common medication for acid reflux, every day for more than 10 years. The pills helped with his heartburn, sure. But what he didn't know was that PPIs reduce stomach acid, and that acid is crucial for absorbing vitamin B12 and magnesium, two nutrients the brain depends on to function well. Without them, the brain struggles to maintain memory, focus, and clarity. A German study found something shocking. Older adults who regularly used PPIs had a 44% higher risk of developing dementia. It was like putting out a small fire in the stomach while letting a much bigger one start in the mind. Gerald eventually saw a neurologist. After a full review of his health and medications, they linked his cognitive decline in part to long-term PPI use. With his doctor's guidance, Gerald slowly transitioned off the medication and made lifestyle changes, smaller meals, avoiding late-night eating, and sleeping with his head slightly elevated. Over time, his memory stabilized. If you're still taking those small purple pills every day, especially as you age, it might be time to ask, is the price of a calm stomach worth the cost to your mind? 6. Antipsychotics. Meant to calm, but at what cost? Margaret was 82. Once an energetic mother of 3, she now lived in a care home. After being diagnosed with early-stage dementia, she became agitated at times, confused, restless, and occasionally frustrated. To help, the nursing staff prescribed her risperidone, a type of antipsychotic medication. The goal was to ease her agitation and keep her calm. At first, it seemed to help. Margaret was quieter, less confused, but over the next few months, her family began to notice something troubling. She stopped smiling. She stopped singing her favorite hymns. She didn't recognize her grandson anymore. It was as though the medication didn't just calm her, it muted her. Antipsychotics like risperidone, olanzapine, and quetiapine work by suppressing dopamine and serotonin, chemicals in the brain responsible for mood, emotion, and cognition. But when those chemicals are dulled too much, especially in older adults, the effects can be devastating. The FDA has issued a black box warning about these medications in elderly patients with dementia. They can increase the risk of death, lead to emotional numbness, and even accelerate brain shrinkage. Margaret's story is not rare. These medications are often prescribed quickly and sometimes stay in place for months or years without reassessment. Her family, alarmed by the changes, spoke with her doctor. Together, they carefully reduced the medication dose, replacing it with non-drug strategies, familiar music, daily walks, and routines that brought comfort. Margaret slowly came back to life, smiling again, even if only briefly, and reconnecting with those around her. If someone you love is on these medications, especially for a long time, don't be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes, what calms the storm on the outside may be quietly eroding what's left within. 5. Z drugs. Sleep isn't always healing. At first, it seemed like a blessing. After weeks, no, Months of tossing and turning, of staring at the ceiling until 3 a.m., Margaret finally found something that worked. Her doctor gave her a little white pill. Zolpidem, just one tablet, and the sleep came quickly, quietly. She finally woke up after a full night in bed. But over time, things started to feel off. She'd wake up not refreshed, but dazed. The days felt fuzzy around the edges, like she was walking through fog. Sometimes, she couldn't remember if she had taken her pills or eaten breakfast. She even stumbled once in the hallway, blaming it on slippers that were too loose. What Margaret didn't know, and what too many seniors still don't, is that drugs like Zolpidem, Ambien, or Esopiclone, Lunesta, don't give your brain the deep, healing sleep it truly needs. They sedate, but they don't restore. The kind of sleep that clears toxins, strengthens memory, and protects your brain, that's called REM sleep, and these drugs disrupt it. A respected study in the BMJ revealed a chilling truth. These medications are linked to higher risks of dementia and a significant rise in fall-related injuries, especially in older adults. So if you're waking up groggy, forgetful, or feeling like something isn't quite right, it might not just be age catching up. It might be your sleep aid pulling you down night after night. The solution isn't to suffer through sleepless nights, but it's time to ask better questions, to seek alternatives that truly support the body and mind, especially in this precious stage of life. 4. Tricyclic antidepressants, mood helpers, brain hurters. George had been battling a quiet sadness since his wife passed. The house was too quiet, the mornings too long. His doctor prescribed something familiar, amitriptyline, one of the older antidepressants, or maybe it was doxepin. He couldn't remember. At first, it helped a little. He felt less numb. But not long after, new problems began. George began to misplace his keys. Then entire conversations would slip from his mind. He struggled to focus, to follow a crossword puzzle he once finished in record time. His children grew concerned. Is this dementia? They wondered. But it wasn't just age. These older medications belong to a class called tricyclic antidepressants. They've been used for decades, but come with a heavy cost for aging brains. They block acetylcholine, a key neurotransmitter involved in memory and learning. When levels of this chemical drop in older adults, the result can mimic early dementia, confusion, poor concentration, and memory loss. It's a cruel irony. A drug meant to lift mood can quietly dim the mind. And what's most alarming? These drugs are still being prescribed, even though safer. Newer options exist, medications that don't carry the same risks for cognitive decline. George isn't alone, and neither are you. If you, or someone you love, has been put on one of these medications, don't be afraid to ask why, and ask what else is possible. The goal isn't just to survive each day. It's to stay sharp, steady, and fully yourself, mind and all. 3. Bladder control meds, urinary relief versus mental decline. Frank was once the type of man who loved long walks and morning coffee with his friends at the diner. At 74, he still had the spirit, but something changed. He started feeling nervous about leaving the house for too long. The sudden urge to go, the fear of not making it in time, it was frustrating, embarrassing even. So, when his doctor prescribed a medication for his overactive bladder, he was relieved. Oxybutynin, they said, would help him take control again. And for a while it did. But then the fog rolled in. Frank started forgetting appointments. Conversations didn't come as easily. He'd find himself standing in the kitchen, unsure of why he went in there. His wife noticed too. He was less sharp, less present. It wasn't just aging. A study from the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF, found that bladder control medications like oxybutynin and tolterodine can shrink parts of the brain, especially the areas responsible for learning and memory. For older adults, that's a serious risk. What's helping your bladder might be hurting your mind. If you or someone you love feels mentally slower, more distracted, or forgetful after starting a bladder medication, it's worth asking questions. Talk to your doctor. There may be safer alternatives, options that protect both your independence and your memory. because no one should have to choose between physical comfort and mental clarity. 2. Statins, the cholesterol paradox. Margaret, 69, had always done her best to stay healthy. She cooked her own meals, watched her weight, and walked every evening. Still, during her last checkup, her cholesterol was high. Her doctor recommended statins, specifically atorvastatin. She trusted the advice. After all, heart attacks and strokes were real dangers at her age. Taking the pill felt like the right move. But weeks turned into months and something fell off. She wasn't as quick on her feet mentally. She found herself searching for words she used to know without thinking. Her daily crossword puzzles became frustrating instead of fun. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was enough to scare her. Later, while reading about the medication, she learned something that made her pause. The brain needs cholesterol. Not the kind that clogs arteries, but the kind that helps build and maintain brain cells, allowing them to talk to each other. Statins, especially when too strong or taken for long periods, can sometimes strip away too much cholesterol. And when that happens, the brain may struggle. Memory loss, brain fog, slower thinking. Some studies even show that these symptoms can improve after stopping statins, under medical supervision, of course. That doesn't mean statins are bad. For many people, they save lives. But they're not one-size-fits-all. If you're taking statins and feel like your mind isn't as sharp as it used to be, speak up. Ask questions. There may be other ways to protect your heart that don't come at the cost of your clarity. Because living longer is only worth it if you can still feel like you. 1. Anticholinergic combinations, the silent brain killers. George was 72 when he first noticed something was off. He'd always had a sharp mind, could recall stories from his childhood in perfect detail, balance his checkbook without a calculator, and beat anyone in his bridge club with ease. But lately, things had started to slip. Names disappeared from his memory. He'd walk into a room and forget why he went there. He thought it was just age creeping in. But something deeper was happening, and he wasn't alone. George, like many others his age, had a neat row of medicines on his nightstand. One for sleep, one for occasional nausea, another for seasonal allergies. None of them seemed alarming. After all, they were over the counter, easy to get, and recommended by friends or even pharmacists. What George didn't know was that these common medicines, when taken together, can quietly damage the brain. They belong to a class of drugs called anticholinergics. Taken alone, each one might not cause much harm, but when combined, often unknowingly, they can become a silent threat. These combinations are hidden in everyday pills, cold medications, motion sickness tablets, muscle relaxants, and sleep aids. And here's the heartbreaking part. Many older adults take several of them at once, not out of carelessness, but out of trust. Trust in medicine, trust in habit, trust that these pills are safe. But science says otherwise. A 10-year study tracking thousands of older adults revealed something shocking. Those with high exposure to anticholinergic combinations had a 54% increased risk of developing dementia. 54%. That's not a small number. That's someone's father, someone's sister, someone's partner. It means that while George was doing all the right things, eating healthy, walking every morning, staying mentally active, a quiet storm was brewing in his medicine cabinet. And that's what makes this danger so cruel, because it hides behind labels, fine print, and medical terms most people don't understand. No one told George. No one warned him, until the signs were too strong to ignore. The good news: your brain can heal. A story of hope for the golden years. Margaret is 72. Once an avid reader and crossword puzzle enthusiast, she started noticing the small things slipping through the cracks. Forgetting why she walked into a room. Misplacing her glasses again. Words that used to come so easily now got stuck somewhere in the back of her mind. She feared the worst. Is this how it begins? She'd whisper to herself. The fear of decline, of losing the very memories that made up her life, weighed heavy. Like many in their golden years, Margaret felt caught in a quiet battle, one she didn't even know she was fighting until it started showing signs. But then, something changed. Her daughter, a nutritionist, handed her an article. The headline stopped her in her tracks. Here's the good news. Your brain can heal. It wasn't a miracle. It was science. And it was natural. Margaret learned that certain everyday foods, simple things she could find in any grocery store, were quietly powerful allies in protecting her brain. They didn't promise perfection or a cure, but they offered something more precious at her age: hope. 1. Blueberries, little berries, big protection. Margaret smiled when she read about blueberries. She loved them already, but now she discovered they were more than just a tasty snack. These tiny berries were filled with antioxidants that fought oxidative stress, the very stress linked to memory decline. Even more surprising, studies had shown that just one small serving of blueberries each day could help improve memory, sharpen focus, and delay brain aging by more than 2 years. 2 years might not seem like much to some, but for Margaret, it meant remembering more birthdays, more family dinners, more stories shared with her grandchildren. 2. Fatty fish, omega-3s for brain cells. Next came a favorite from her childhood: salmon. She remembered how her mother used to bake it with just a touch of lemon. Now she learned that fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel were rich in DHA, a type of omega-3 that directly nourishes brain cells. DHA helps keep the communication between neurons clear and efficient, almost like keeping telephone lines free from static. More importantly, eating fish just twice a week could lower the risk of Alzheimer's by 60%. That statistic hit Margaret hard. She circled it in pen. Twice a week for a lifetime of memories? That was a bargain worth taking. 3. Leafy greens, nature's memory booster. Last on the list were the leafy greens: spinach, kale, and collard greens. Not always her favorite, but after reading what they could do for her brain, Margaret changed her mind. These greens are packed with vitamin K, lutein, and folate, nutrients that not only support brain health, but actually help slow down cognitive aging. One study even found that people who ate greens daily had brains that functioned as if they were 11 years younger. Margaret paused. 11 years younger. She thought about what she was doing at 61. Traveling, dancing, remembering every friend's birthday without a calendar. The thought warmed her heart. A message to you, reader. If you're reading this and you're in your 60s, 70s, or beyond, let Margaret's story speak to you. Yes, time changes our bodies and sometimes our minds, but nature has not left us helpless. There is still room for healing, still room to fight, and still time to take small steps that bring big peace of mind. Start with what's on your plate. You don't need to chase trends or take expensive supplements. Just eat more of what your brain already loves. A handful of blueberries each morning. A plate of grilled fish twice a week. A daily portion of greens, steamed, sautéed, or tossed in soup. These aren't just foods. They're acts of care. Small choices that say to yourself, my memories are worth keeping. So here's to Margaret, and here's to you. Because it's never too late to feed your mind with what it needs to remember the moments that matter most. Final thoughts for you or a loved one. Aging doesn't mean helplessness. You can still protect your brain, starting today. If you or someone close is noticing memory issues, review medications. Don't stop anything suddenly, but have a serious talk with your doctor. Because dementia doesn't happen overnight. But stopping it? That can start right now.